The wristwatch was invented for women. France, 1917. A British sergeant checks his left wrist. The dial glows green in the dark. Luminous paint, standard issue. 8 seconds before the artillery barrage begins. Mud on his sleeve, a whistle in his right hand. Tick. For 3 centuries before that moment, wearing a watch on your wrist marked you as a woman. Queen Elizabeth I received one as jewelry in 1571. Abraham Louis Breguet made one for the Queen of Naples in 1810. Men used pocket watches. Always. Then, 4 years of industrial war changed that forever. So how did women's jewelry become a military essential? And why did the invention that should have ended the wristwatch, a tiny, vibrating crystal, instead trigger the worst industrial collapse in Swiss history? The answer changes more than you'd expect. Here's the assumption most people carry. The wristwatch was invented for World War I, soldiers needing hands-free timekeeping, engineers rushing a solution to the trenches. That sounds reasonable. The war did make it universal, but here is the trap. The first wristwatch wasn't made in a military depot. It was made for a Hungarian countess in 1868 by Patek Philippe. Records document a Swiss wristwatch produced for Countess Koskowitz of Hungary that year. And even that wasn't the beginning. The oldest surviving wristwatch dates to 1806, made as a gift for Josephine de Beauharnais, Napoleon's wife. History doesn't remember the women who wore these things for 2.5 centuries. It remembers the soldiers who made them respectable. That gap between who actually created something and who gets cultural credit is what this story is really about. A man finally made the wristwatch essential for men. He did it not in a trench, but 5,000 feet above the city of Paris, Nuremberg, around 1505. A clockmaker, accounts suggest Peter Henlein was among the first, creates a small, iron spring-driven timepiece, small enough to carry on the body. A Taschenuhr, a pocket clock. It runs 40 hours on a single winding. It has no minute hand. It doesn't need one. The thing loses several hours per day depending on whether the room is warm or cold. An hour hand pointing vaguely toward noon is the best craft can offer. These early personal timepieces hang from chains around necks or sit in waistcoat pockets. They are wildly inaccurate. For 2 centuries, owning one is purely a matter of status. Accuracy is secondary. Everything changes in 1657. Robert Hooke in England and Christian Huygens in the Netherlands simultaneously, and with mutual bitterness, develop the balance spring, a tiny coiled piece of metal that gives the balance wheel something to regulate against. The effect is almost miraculous. Accuracy improves from several hours of error per day to approximately 10 minutes. Within 20 years, watchmakers add the minute hand. Before 1657, there had been no point in having one. By 1680, the minute hand appears on British watch faces. By 1700, French ones follow. Thomas Mudge invents the lever escapement in 1754, the single most important technological breakthrough in mechanical watchmaking. Pierre Leroy solves temperature-induced error in 1765 with a bimetallic compensated balance wheel. The watch is shrinking, becoming more precise, more wearable. But wearable, for the first century of the wristwatch's life, means one thing: a jeweled ornament strapped to a woman's wrist in a royal court. But that's only half the story. Here is the assumption that seems airtight. Military necessity created the wristwatch. Soldiers needed it, so engineers made it. That sounds logical. Here is where the logic breaks. Officers in the British Army were using wristwatches during the Anglo-Burma War as far back as 1885. The Garston Company of London patented a watch wristlet design in 1893. Mappin and Webb began producing what they called their campaign watch for soldiers during the Sudan campaign in 1898, 16 years before the First World War began. The military didn't invent the wristwatch. It adopted something that already existed. What war provided wasn't technology. It provided permission, because civilian men wouldn't go near one. The pocket watch was a masculine object, heavy, ceremonial, extracted from a waistcoat with deliberate gravity. A wristwatch was, by the social consensus of the era, a trinket for the weaker sex. Then came the creeping barrage. In World War I, artillery units had to fire shells landing just meters ahead of advancing infantry, shifting forward on a timed schedule. If the timing was off by 60 seconds, soldiers walked into their own fire. Every officer and sergeant needed to know the exact time, not buried in a pocket, not groped for under mud and kit, on the wrist, immediately. The UK War Office began issuing wristwatches to combatants in 1917. By war's end, the British Horological Journal wrote that the wristlet watch was little used by the sterner sex before the war, but now is seen on the wrist of nearly every man in uniform. By 1934, Swiss exports of wristwatches had nearly doubled those of pocket watches. This is where it gets strange. Paris, October 1904. Alberto Santos Dumont, the Brazilian aviation pioneer, has a problem. He is flying his airship above the Bois de Boulogne, and he cannot check his pocket watch without releasing the controls. He mentions this to his friend Louis Cartier. Within months, Cartier produces a flat, rectangular wristwatch with a leather strap, a square case, and a crown at 12 o'clock. The Santos Dumont, the first wristwatch explicitly designed for a man, for a purpose. Cartier still sells a version of it today, but here is the detail that shifts the whole picture. The invention that nearly killed the wristwatch entirely was developed by the Swiss, not by Japan, not by America. In 1962, the Centre Electronique Horloger, a consortium of roughly 20 Swiss manufacturers, including Omega, Patek Philippe, and Piaget, was established in Neuchâtel specifically to develop a Swiss quartz wristwatch. In 1967, their Beta 1 prototype set world records for accuracy at the Neuchâtel Observatory competition. The Swiss had the technology first. They chose not to deploy it at scale because doing so would mean admitting that 500 years of mechanical craft could be replaced by a battery and a sliver of crystal. Seiko didn't hesitate. On December 25, 1969, the Seiko Astron hit Japanese shelves, the world's first commercial quartz wristwatch, accurate to within 5 seconds per day, better than any mechanical watch alive. By 1978, quartz had overtaken mechanical watches in global popularity. Swiss watch employment collapsed from 90,000 workers in 1970 to just 28,000 by 1988. 60,000 craftsmen gone. I'll be honest, they built the thing that destroyed them and then watched Japan sell it. In 1983, management consultant Nicholas G. Hayek was handed the Swiss watch industry's financial autopsy. He didn't file it. Instead, he proposed what his clients considered an act of humiliation. Build a cheap, colorful plastic watch. Price it at $30. Call it the second watch, the Swatch. In less than 2 years, more than 2.5 million swatches sold. The revenue funded the survival of Omega, Longines, Breguet, Blancpain, all folded into what became the Swatch Group. Meanwhile, the Omega Speedmaster had already been to the moon. Buzz Aldrin wore it during the Apollo 11 moonwalk in July 1969, the same month the quartz revolution began. In 2019, a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime sold at auction for $31.2 million, the most expensive watch ever sold. The mechanical watch survived by becoming something quartz can never be, a made object, a proof of human patience, handed from wrist to wrist. So the next time you check the time on your wrist, a scratched Casio, a Rolex, an Apple Watch, consider what you're actually doing. You're completing a gesture that began as women's jewelry in a Tudor court, was adopted by soldiers who needed to survive artillery barrages, nearly erased by a grain of crystal, saved by a $30 piece of plastic. It came this close to disappearing. It didn't. Some objects outlast every attempt to replace them, not because they're perfect, but because they've become something else entirely. Evidence that a human being was here, marking time. What everyday object should we investigate next? Drop it in the comments. The stranger, the history, the more we want it. And if this is your first object lore, there's a shelf full of stories just like this one, waiting for you. This is Object Lore. The history of the world is hiding in plain sight. Until next time.